All right. Good morning. We're live here on Ask the Agronomist this morning, coming to you from Monmouth. Apologize for my shabby attire here. It's plenty warm here in the conference room at Monmouth, and this happens to be one of my favorite T-shirts. My daughter Audrey made this for me a few years ago for Christmas, and I think she could probably sell these if she wanted to go into business for herself. But anyway, happy to be here with you on Ask the Agronomist. Going solo here this morning, so have not really worked out what we're going to do to replace producer Jennifer and producer Adam, who have moved on to bigger and better things. So I guess I'll take a little bit of credit for their success. They were an integral part here of Ask the Agronomist, and they did so well. They moved on to bigger and better things. Jennifer still helps out behind the scenes and was involved in the marketing of this episode, since our new HT4 soybeans are part of her life these days and her new role in marketing. So she was pretty excited about that, and actually put the Vyconic logo. We'll talk about that here in a bit. We're not going to talk about that exclusively, so sorry, Jennifer, you're not going to get an hour's worth of Vyconic talk here on Ask the Agronomist. We're going to touch on some other things going on. Busy day for me. I've got the truck loaded up with plot bags of seed. And when I get done here, I'm headed to Roanoke to our focus site there, where I'm going to meet up with some other agronomists, and we're going to package seed for this year's crown rot trials this later today. And those trials will have 48 different hybrids in them. And we're going to plant those at about 25 locations around the state, try to get them in early in soils that are prone to infections of crown rot, and screen a whole bunch of different hybrids for tolerance to crown rot. So that's something we started doing in 24. We're going to continue doing that in 25. Obviously we've known for a long time that there were differences in hybrids. We see that every year, but to have 48 different hybrids side by side at a location that is being managed to hopefully make crown rot happen is something relatively new that we're excited about doing, and think there'll be a lot of value in that for our sellers, our dealers, and ultimately our customers to understand which products have a higher risk, let's say, for being negatively impacted by crown rot. A lot of really good hybrids are very susceptible to crown rot, and you can have a lot of success with those as long as you're managing them, planting them, positioning them in environments where we see less crown rot, which would be lower organic matter soils, better drain soils, lower fertility environments, planting dates probably later than early May. Things like that are things that we know we tend to see a lot less crown rot infection in those environments. So and then after that, unfortunately, get to end my day on a sad note. I have a visitation to attend, and I don't normally talk about this stuff here on Ask the Agronomist, but it's kind of ironic. It has a little bit of a connection to Ask the Agronomist. 2 weeks ago, I had Doug Schemmer on here, and Doug's dad just passed away this week. Unfortunately, Ron Schemmer, great guy, farmer his entire life in the Williamsville area around Springfield, and I'll be headed down to Athens later to attend those services. And for any of you watching that happen to know Doug, you might reach out to him and pass your condolences along. But anyway, that'll be the end of my day. So I'm going to be here on Ask the Agronomist, getting on road to Roanoke, and then headed home to get changed and cleaned up, and then headed to Athens. So be a busy day, but you're all having busy days as well. So another thing I wanted to talk about here on Ask the Agronomist this morning, we had a really good first webinar, and I haven't been involved in this. I give all the credit to my colleague Rachel Willis and Sean Evans, who is our regional agronomy manager. They came up with an idea for an agronomy series that's going to be. They did it through a Zoom meeting, and the agronomy series is called Dig a Little Deeper. I love the name. We do a lot of digging in the agronomy world, always looking at roots, always looking at the soil, always looking beneath the surface. So we always talk about digging up plants before you just go making assumptions of what's going on with that plant. And then it's also, dig a little deeper means we'll get into the details of something, get into the subject matter, study it a little deeper, a little more intently. And so I love the name of that series. And we had Dr. Nick Sider from University of Illinois, entomologist, share with us his knowledge about corn leaf aphids. And it was a very, very, very good session. It is available as a recording for you to watch if you want to. The other thing I like about this Dig a Little Deeper series that we're doing, it's really intended for external audiences. So we do a lot of stuff internally within Bayer to keep ourselves, educated on what's going on and learn new things. But sometimes we don't get as much of that information out to you, our customer, as we should sometimes. And so that's to me, the coolest thing about this Dig a Little Deeper series is it's really designed for your learning, not for ours. But at the same time, I learned a lot about cornleaf aphids from Dr. Sider and other experts that we've been talking to over the past 6 months or 9 months, I guess, since aphids kind of burst onto the scene in early July last summer in populations that we had never seen before in this part of the country, and frankly caused damage to corn that we've never seen before in this part of the country. And, if I think about all the questions that somebody has asked me about aphids since last summer, it's, why were they so bad? Why did they seem to like some hybrids more than others? Are we going to see them again next year? Tell me more about their life cycle. Where did they come from? Where do they overwinter? How many generations a year do they have? How fast do they reproduce? What are some of the biological control mechanisms for them? What are the chemical control options for them? When should we spray? How do you know if you need to spray? Just on and on and on and on. Every question I can think of off the top of my head that somebody has asked me in the last 9 months about aphids, Dr. Sider addressed those. And I also got, and this is cool too, just resources for me. I actually got 3 pages, and there's a lot of words on each page. So that's page 1. There's page 2, and there's page 3. So on the left-hand side of each page are all the questions that somebody asked Dr. Sider in the chat during his Zoom webinar. And I got a little chat envy here, I'll tell you, with Dr. Sider, because he got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 questions in an hour. So you guys need to pick it up a little bit, because we're 8 minutes in, or I guess maybe the speaker needs to pick it up to actually say something that's interesting enough that you want to ask a question. So I'll take that on me. But anyway, so the questions and the answers from Dr. Sider. Now, in full disclosure, there's probably like 4 of these questions that I asked, but that's me. I ask a lot of questions, and everybody that has ever been to a meeting with me knows that all too well, that I like to ask a lot of questions. But I really think we have a very good understanding of what drove the aphid populations last year, what drove the amount of impact that they had on the crop. That was due to their numbers and also their timing when they arrived. They were in much greater numbers than normal last year, and they arrived earlier than normal last year. And those 2 things really went together to have the impact that they ended up having on the crop. Most years we don't have anywhere near that many, and they get here later, so they don't have time to go through that many life cycles. They can go through a life cycle, and I'm going to look this up, make sure I get it right. Dr. Sider says, depending on temperature, it takes anywhere from 5 to 15 days for a newborn aphid to reach adulthood. So he said 7 to 10 days per generation is a reasonable time frame in July. And so, every 7 to 10 days, they're going through a generation. And so when they get here in June, like they did last year, they've got a lot of time to go through multiple generations. And that's one of the reasons their life cycle is so fast. They reproduce so fast. That's how they can just kind of explode in numbers and seemingly overnight. It's not overnight, but seemingly overnight, they go from I didn't see them to the plant's covered with aphids. Another thing that we talked about on that call that I think is a popular misconception. Two things actually that are popular misconceptions. A lot of people are blaming Hurricane Beryl on what brought them here, and while it undoubtedly brought more of them here, they were here long before the hurricane happened. So they got started here probably in June, and when Hurricane Beryl rolled through, that undoubtedly brought more. But the mild winter, they probably overwintered much closer to here than normal, so they didn't have to travel as far to get here. And when they got here, conditions were obviously perfect for them because they really, really, really produced extremely quickly. And a couple other common misperceptions is that they're going after sugar from corn plants, which they obviously ingest the sap. They're not really drinking it. They're sucking the sap out of the corn plant, and that sap is primarily water and sugar. But it also has amino acids, proteins, nitrogen, things like that in it. That's actually what they need. They need the proteins, they need the amino acids, they need the nitrogen that's in the phloem of the corn plant. The water and the sugar that's in the phloem of the corn plant, they excrete most of that as honeydew. They've actually got a pretty cool digestive system. It's got what's called a hemopteran filter chamber in it that allows them to, before everything they're ingesting gets to their digestive system, they can divert the water and the sugar and basically shoot it straight out the back end of the aphid. And that's what all the honeydew is that's all over the corn plant that they're on. So basically, they're throwing away the water and the sugar. They keep enough to feed themselves and hydrate themselves, but that's a very small fraction of what they're taking from the corn plant. But what they're really after is the nitrogen, the amino acids, and the proteins that are also in that corn sap. And so a plant with a higher content of sugar is not going to be more attractive to an aphid. There are other things that and Dr. Sider touches on this as well. What is there about certain hybrids that makes them reproduce so much faster or makes them more attractive in some way? He thinks it's primarily reproductive capabilities more than they're more attracted to one thing versus another. But that's not, that's not completely known. But I'm trying to remember there was one more thing I wanted to say that was kind of a popular misconception. And that has slipped my mind. So I should have wrote that down before I started. So if it comes back to me, I'll touch on it. But if you want to know more about aphids, that video replay of Dig a Little Deeper is available. Talk to your local FSR. They can get that to you. I've sent it out to all my FSRs, and we can share that with you. And I think the next Dig a Little Deeper series, there'll be some advertising coming out on that when it airs, is going to be on water hemp management. So if there's something that even more people are concerned about than aphids, water hemp would be a good example of that. So we're going to try to keep these Dig a Little Deeper broadcasts kind of focused on timely information, things that are of interest to people. We'll get the invites out through our dealers, through our sales reps. If you want to register for those events ahead of time, please do that. It's great to have the live audience on there because the live audience, just like the live audience here, can chat in questions of the presenters and get your questions answered live. And when you're asking questions, I think that improves the content for everybody else who's watching. So while you're getting your question answered, which is always good, the fact that you're asking a question, I think makes it a better program for everybody else who could also be asking a question, but maybe they didn't want to for whatever reason. So watch out for those. Nice compliment to what we do here on Ask the Agronomist. They're going to be a little more professional than what we do here on Ask the Agronomist. We're more low tech here. It's a one-man show. I really hope that the Dig a Little Deeper series is something that's got some legs and takes off and kind of turns into a big thing, because I think it's very cool. And again, kudos to my colleague Rachel Willis for kind of being the mother, let's say, of that great idea, and with a lot of help from Sean Evans to pull that off. So back on the board here behind me, I don't know how well you can see that. There's kind of a glare there. So I've got five groups, and you're probably familiar with herbicide groups. So do you know what group 9 herbicide might be there? You got 2 group 4s, you got a group 10, a group 27. So 27 is probably the one you've heard the most. You're maybe heard the most about, because of at one time there was a technology on the market called HT4 which was a soybean that was tolerant to group 27 herbicides. And there, in about another, if all goes well, about another year and a half, there's going to be another soybean on the market that's now tolerant to group 27. So group 9, the group 9 in this example is our friend Roundup. The first group 4, dicamba. Group 10 is Liberty, or glufosinate. Group 27, in this case, this is a mesotrione. There's different group 27s. This one's based on mesotrione. And the other group 4 is 2,4-D. So those 5 different herbicides are what makes up the traits in our HT4 soybeans, which were just the commercial trade name for that technology was just released at the Commodity Classic in November. So I don't know how many of you went to Commodity Classic. I've actually never been. People say that needs to be on my bucket list. They say I need to get to Commodity Classic. Maybe somebody will get me talked into doing that someday. We have a lot of people go. Our yield contest winners get to go. They do a lot of cool stuff there. For DeKalb, the Commodity Classic is kind of our Super Bowl. It is a big deal for DeKalb, and I probably do need to get that on my bucket list. And some year when it's someplace I want to go to, I need to get my butt there so I can experience Commodity Classic. But actually, at this most recent Commodity Classic, we finally announced, we've been talking about HT4 soybeans for years. You guys get tired of hearing about HT4 soybeans. You just want to know when you're going to be able to buy some. And you probably don't really care that much about what the name is either. But we aren't going to call them HT4 soybeans forever. So Vyconic, which spelled with a V, so it's not bionic, it's Vyconic. Is the new trade name for HT4. I kind of like the name. It's kind of grown on me. It's, all these things today are, they're all made up names, or, there's a lot of products on the market that, some group of people just invented the name. The word didn't exist before that product existed. And it's really hard to come up with a new, creative, catchy, memorable name that people don't hate. We've named a lot of products over the years, and competitors have named a lot of products over the years. The first time you hear it, well, that's dumb. Why'd you call it that? And so when I first heard Vyconic, I thought, well, that's not bad. It rolls off the tongue. It sounds kind of catchy. Sounds kind of cool. There's actually a little bit of thought that went into. So if you're familiar with the word iconic, about things that are, unique and different and special, and then V in Roman numerals is 5. So that's kind of, the reason for the word. If you want to know the reason for the word, There was a whole host of, I don't know what all the other words we considered before we landed on Vyconic was, but there was a whole host of them, and there was actually a few people that were suggesting that we go back to our Western theme. So did you know, if you're old enough to remember some of the old Monsanto herbicides, you might know this. And after I say it, you'll realize it, even if you didn't know it. Monsanto used to have a Western theme for their products. So I can't remember all of them, but the first one that I had up there on my list, which would you believe Roundup's 50 years old? That blows my mind. I guess I'm 55. That blows my mind as well. So anyway, so Roundup. You might not have ever thought of Roundup as like a cattle Roundup, but Roundup. We had a herbicide called Bullet. A lot of shooting guns in the Old West. We had a herbicide called Lasso. Lasso. We had a herbicide called Lariat, which is another name for Lasso. So we got real creative there. Let's see what else. Seems like I'm missing. Little closer to little closer to home. Harness. That's a little bit newer technology. So for a lot of years, Monsanto was on a Western theme with their products, and then sometimes we do cool things like we add an ultra or an extra or a number to the name. So there was, there were fears that HT4 could end up being like Extend Flex Extra or Extend Flex Ultra. Those might have been on the list, and certainly Vyconic is much better than any of those. So we didn't stay with our Western theme. We didn't just put a number on it. We didn't put an Ultra, a Flex, a Flexier, or anything silly like that. We went with Vyconic. So as I like to point out to my marketing angel, Jennifer, the name's fun, and yeah, the name's cool, and yeah, if the name was crappy, that would get people all spun up. But in the end, what's going to make the technology special is the flexibility that it offers of more weed control options, more weed control systems, better weed control options, better weed control systems. The yield and the performance and the weed control is what's going to make the technology successful. If you got really good stuff, it doesn't matter what the name is, and if you don't have good stuff, it also doesn't matter what the name is. So I got an answer here. So we're up to 2 inches. I had 1 inch and 7/10. I put in the chat, how much rain people have had. So Merle, who's over in the Bloomington area, has had 2 inches. So I need to look up on climate and my historical weather data, which we talk about that here on Ask the Agronomist from time to time, and see when the last time we had, when we got more coming. I don't know how much moisture we're going to get for this week, but let's say we get somewhere between 2 and 3 inches total for the week. I need to go back and see when the last time we had that much rain in a week was, and it will be in July. I'm fairly certain of that. So it's been a long time since we've had this much moisture in a 5, 6, 7 day period. So nice to see some moisture. And I was a little surprised. We've got more frost left in the ground than I realized we did. We were pretty cold there with minimal snow cover. And I think we did get some pretty good frost depth because when we'd had 1.5 inches of rain and it was bone dry, there was quite a bit of water standing in fields that wasn't able to soak through. And we didn't have a lot of runoff, so I think we'll get the benefit of most of that moisture, even though there was still some frost on the ground. So anyway, if anybody can beat 2 inches, put that in the chat. And if anybody's had, if you've been on the short end of things too, it's I don't know how general these rains were on all my farms. They all had within about 2/10 of each other the same amount of rain. So in my little local area, the rain seemed to be pretty general. So I think as we as we talk a little bit more about HT4 soybeans and the Vyconic brand name, just an update on where we're at with that technology. Our hope is that they're available for the 27 growing season. We're waiting on export approvals for lots of other countries. We've got all the approvals we need in the U.S. You could plant the beans in the U.S. today. We don't have herbicides registered for the beans yet, and you don't have a market for the beans yet, so it wouldn't do you much good to plant them. But we've got all the approvals we need in the U.S. We're just waiting on export approvals, which is generally always where we're at when you're launching a new trait. And when those export approvals happen is not under our control. That's under the countries that have to grant those approvals control. And things are a little weird in the world these days, and sometimes people aren't getting along as good as maybe they used to. So, we certainly hope that doesn't cause any delays. But we learned a long time ago not to get real definitive on when something was going to come out, and things often get delayed. So let's hope this is not one of them, because I'm really excited to be able to offer this technology. If you think about getting along with neighbors and managing differences between corn and soybean programs, and you've got split fields, and we go to great lengths these days to mitigate drift, control drift, reduce drift. But when you've got a split field of corn and soybeans right next to each other, one's going to drift on the other, or both are going to drift on each other, most of the time, at least a certain extent. And so, if you think about one of the more common drift issues we have is actually a Group 27 corn herbicide post drifting into soybeans, causing, at least visual damage, if not actual damage. So it would be nice to have soybeans that were resistant to corn Group 27s, and Vyconic soybeans will be. It will also be really nice to have the first bean in the marketplace that will accept either 2,4-D or dicamba. So you don't have to choose one or the other. You can plant a bean that will give you the flexibility to use either one, and remains to be seen what happens with the dicamba label. We are still pursuing a re-registration for the over-the-top dicamba products in soybeans, anticipating that for the 26 growing season. Not likely for the 25 growing season, because that's basically here already, and these things take time. So and what we do with the Group 27 in soybean weed control, is kind of yet to be seen. Probably will be looked at as more of a residual product than a foliar applied post product. But there definitely are still weed control advantages of the Group 27 chemistry. And we're seeing a lot of really nice weed control and weed efficacy when you compare things like Group 15s and Group 27s, and some of the other chemistry that's available, such as PPO chemistry and things like that, to give you a really strong soil residual program. And then to couple that with really good post-emergence flexibility in that system as well. So be a lot more time for us to educate people on that system. And again, before you can plant it, you'll probably be tired of us talking about it. But we are very excited about it. I see another question. Okay, so Merle had been out digging in the frozen ground, and he said before the rain, he had a foot of frost, and so that rain's probably melting through that frost as we speak. But that would explain why we had some water standing in fields when we'd only had an inch of rain. It was having a hard time soaking through. So hopefully most of you had enough. You might have still had a layer of frost in the ground, but if the top few inches was thawed, hopefully you had the ability to retain most of that moisture, because we could certainly use some moisture. We're not, like I always say, I would prefer a dry spring to a wet spring any day. and generally speaking, we fight too much moisture more than we fight a lack of moisture. And you can't store up a year's worth of moisture in the spring. So a wet spring does nothing but bad things. So you don't ever want to wish for a wet spring. You're better off to wish for timely rains in the summer, because even if we have a wet spring, and even if we replenish our subsoil, I hope we don't get enough rain this spring to replenish our subsoil, because that would mean we're having a record wet spring for that to happen, and that's not a good thing. So let's have enough moisture to have seed beds that seeds can grow in. Let's let it be a little on the dry side, and then let's hope we get timely rains when we need them in June, July, and August. And that's always a better recipe for high yields. Going to be tough to have higher yields this year than what we experienced last year. I'm real curious to see what the statewide average ends up being. It would have been better had we not had aphids. If we hadn't had aphids last year in corn, I think we could have set a yield record for the state of Illinois for a new average that would have stood for a lot of years. Even with aphids causing a lot of damage in some situations, we're going to set a new statewide yield record for corn. Probably not soybeans, but we certainly will for corn. I'm anxious to see what that comes, or what that number is when that comes out. It gives us something new to shoot for in the future. And as you're looking at looking ahead to 25, things like did you get your fall burn down on? Did you get your fall fertilizer done? Do you still have more spring fertilizer to do? I saw some anhydrous tanks getting staged in fields. I didn't actually see anything going on because we were waiting for the rest of that frost to get out of the ground. And now we've had moisture, so we didn't get that early window that we sometimes get to get that spring anhydrous on. Next week looks beautiful. If you didn't get a ton of rain this week, maybe by next week, it's gonna dry up pretty fast, because as dry as we are, this inch or two of rain we're getting, we get some 60-degree days and some sun and some breeze. There'll be fields fit to get into fairly quickly, I think. But in a lot of places, we didn't get the amount of fall nitrogen we normally do done, and so there's probably more spring ammonia to do in some places than normal. So obviously, if you didn't do a fall burn down, you're going to need to keep an eye on things this spring and make sure those fields are not greening up on you. If you've got cover crops that need to be taken out, if you're a timely removal cover crop kind of person versus let it get big and plant it green cover crop person, there's all different schools of thought on what's the best way to measure to manage cover crops. But if you want to be timely with that removal, I think there's some wheat that did get top dressed last week. So if you've got wheat to top dress, if you've got cover crops to take out, if you've got anhydrous to get on, looking for these early opportunities to get those type of operations done. I greatly prefer spring anhydrous when you can get it on a month ahead of planting versus the phone call. One of the least favorite phone calls I get, and it happens multiple times every spring, is how long do I have to wait after I put on my spring anhydrous before I can plant my corn? And you're expecting me to give you a number, and we generally say something like 7 to 10 days would be nice. Sometimes you can cheat that a little bit if you've got good soil conditions. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than that. I saw a situation one time where, and this was in a worst case scenario. This was strip till on sand, where it had been either 27 or 29 days. My memory's getting foggy, but it's somewhere around 4 full weeks that product had been on, and we still had very serious damage. But that was in a dry, sandy soil where we were planting, right on top of that ammonia band, and that was kind of an extreme situation where we had a dry soil, no rain, and we were planting right on top of it, and even I think it was 29 days. So let's say 4 weeks. 4 weeks after application, we still had injury. So that's not going to happen typically. But if you're wanting me to tell you that 2 days is okay, I'm not going to tell you 2 days is okay, because it's almost never okay. So hopefully you get a window to get out there, get that on. If you've got more, dry fertilizer to put on, hopefully we have a good early window to do that. And hopefully you've got your, prepay all done. You know what your pre is going to be. You know what your post program is going to be. You know what your fungicide program is going to be. If you don't have all that stuff, kind of figured out ahead of time, we got another, let's say month or so here before spring breaks wide open. 3 weeks from now, last year, we had guys planting in Central Illinois. Now, I don't know that it feels like that's going to happen this year, but our, aggressive producers that, either got to be first or have a lot of acres to cover, aren't scared to start planting in March. And in the last week of March last year, we had a lot of soybean planters rolling. We had a few corn planters rolling. We had people that weren't just doing test plots, weren't just doing the first pass on their planting date study. They were planting for real, and those crops turned out to be fabulous last year. Sometimes those really early planting dates, we have a lot more disease issues with those, and you don't necessarily see the yield benefit from planting that early. But last year we certainly did. So I think if you look at long range weather forecasts, they're going to tell you one thing. I tend not to look at long range weather forecasts. My opinion is that 2 days is about long enough for me. You get beyond that, it seems to get pretty iffy. So a lot of time is spent looking at long range forecasts and making plans based on long range forecasts. If you like doing that, not knock yourself out. But it's really, and any meteorologist will tell you this, much beyond 7 to 10 days, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. You'll get about like a 40 or 50 or 60% chance of something in a long range forecast. And, if you don't have a clue what's going to happen, you'd be like 50-50. And if you're 40-60, 50-50, 60-40, that's I don't put a lot of faith in the long range stuff. It's fun to look at, fun to talk about. Gives the guys at the coffee shop something to discuss, but we just don't know what's going to happen, more than about 7 to 10 days out, and even more than 3 or 4 days out. Our ability to predict is not what we would like it to be, and you all know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But if you were going to do anything different this year, from a herbicide standpoint, we had people that were, not necessarily completely satisfied with their weed control in either corn or beans last year. Some people were very satisfied. So if you were very satisfied, you're probably going to do the same thing you did last year. If you were unsatisfied, was that because of the program, or was that because of the weather, or was that because of the management, or the timing, or the rate, or what was it that was a little bit off in what you did last year? Still time to make adjustments in that, tweak that. In a lot of cases, moving that application earlier in the season, if it's a post-emergence application, fixes a lot of things. The smaller the weeds are when we spray them, the higher success rate we're going to have with whatever program you're using, because most of the failures we see today are not caused by late flushes of weeds. That's a very common misconception, that a lot of these weeds that you see in late July and August making your fields look ugly are late emerging weeds. They're generally not. They were generally there when we made that post application. We injured that weed, we stunted that weed, we hurt that weed, but we didn't kill that weed. It takes several weeks for it to recover and get bigger than the crop. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, that's the first time we see that weed, first time we realize it's there. That's why I'm a big proponent of let's scout fields. I'm going to say 7 to 14 days after your post-emergence application. and see if you can find any damaged and not dead weeds, or see if you see any newly emerged weeds, like itty bitty ones that look perfectly healthy, like they didn't get sprayed. That's an indication that they probably did come up after that post-emergence application. We oftentimes put additional residual control with our post-application, but if you don't get rainfall, right after you make that application, which we often don't, that product's not activated until it gets rained in. And so if a weed germinates 2 days after you spray, it may not be controlled by that residual product that hasn't been activated yet. So if you walk out in that field 10 days after you made your post-emergence application and you're seeing healthy small weeds, or I'm more worried about the undead bigger weeds that were sprayed the first time but weren't completely controlled, generally speaking, within 10 to 14 days, you can pretty well tell if it's not dead by then or really close to dead. It's probably not going to die, and that weed at some point is probably going to rear its ugly head in your field. And as soon as that weed has recovered enough that we can control it, is the time to spray it. Not 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks later, but right then, get that taken care of. And if you get that field cleaned up before canopy, it's probably going to stay clean season long. If we let a few stragglers survive, or we have a few more come up before canopy, eventually those weeds are going to work their way up through that soybean canopy. And then, all of a sudden, the first week of July, that first week of August, that field that you thought was perfectly clean, you now realize is not perfectly clean. And that's when we get into situations where we're tempted to do things we shouldn't do. So such as, spray chest high beans with a herbicide, or get somebody to throw a herbicide in with their fungicide pass. That's all stuff that, not only is it off label and not terribly effective and potentially damaging to our crop, we just don't want to go there. So we need to move these post-emergence applications, both the first application and the respray application, up into May and June. And the only thing we should be spraying in July or later is a fungicide, or maybe occasionally an insecticide. We don't need any herbicide applications that late in the summer. So I think as you're finalizing your plans for 25, still time to position some side-by-sides. If you want to look at some new hybrids, there's still time to, visit with your seed supplier to make sure you've got things placed right by farm. If you want to try to position things more intentionally on your farm, our dealers and sales reps are very happy to sit down and talk with you about where we think these products fit the best, what our specific population recommendations are for hybrids. If there's any specific management recommendations, like, you really, really, really need to be aggressive with fungicide on this product, and this product you don't have to be as aggressive, those sort of things that, we can tell you how those products should be managed. Some people, don't really want to manage, every single hybrid differently. But if you like to spray fungicide, we can recommend a portfolio of products that really appreciates being sprayed with fungicide. If you don't like to spray fungicide, meaning you're only going to do it in an absolute emergency, and even then you might not do it, well, there's certain hybrids we wouldn't want to recommend to you if that's how you feel about using fungicides. So those type of things can be still be worked out. Can be a little bit challenging to switch hybrids this time of year, depending on what availability is. And speaking of availability, if you get bad news from somebody that the hybrid that you ordered and paid for back who knows when is not going to be available to you, and you don't want to, substitute that product, give us a call, and we might have something that you would like to have instead of somebody else's second or third, fourth or fifth choice. So this is the time of year when people find out that what they thought they had, they don't have. That happens to us too. Happens to every company from time to time. It's not happening to us as much this year as it has in past years. So we do still have a good availability of some really good stuff. And so if you get some bad news from somebody, let us know. We'll see if we can help you out. And with that, unless if somebody's got a question real quick here before we sign off, I think we're gonna let this episode end a little bit early so I can get to Roanoke and help the rest of the team that's packaging. We're gonna have what are we gonna end up with? We're gonna have about 24 locations with 48 hybrids. So whatever 24 times 48 is, that's how many little packets we're going to make. And then 24 of those packets go in a box. I cleaned Menards out the other day, Menards in Galesburg. If you're looking for medium-sized moving boxes, you might want to go someplace other than Menards in Galesburg, because unless they've got a delivery truck, I cleaned them out of those yesterday. Bought a big stack of moving boxes. If you were in the Menards parking lot yesterday watching some fat guy try to get boxes inside his truck when the wind was blowing 50 mile an hour and they were flipping all around and flying out of his hands and flying off the cart that he had them on, it would have made a good blooper video if you put some music to it. I probably looked like an idiot trying to get these boxes in my truck before they flew away like a kite out in the parking lot. So with that, one more reminder. Next episode is the 20th of March. So if it's a normal planting season in Central Illinois, whatever that means, we probably have one more episode before the planters are rolling here in Central Illinois. And I look forward to being back with you in 2 weeks on the 20th. Get your planter ready, get your sprayer ready, get everything ready to go. Stay safe, and we'll be back with you in 2 weeks. Everybody take care.